TV and newspaper mogul Rupert Murdoch testified before an ethics panel for the second day yesterday, saying that he was sorry for the phone hacking scandal, but also claiming that he didn't know much about it. Here's something that doesn't happen every day. One of the most powerful men in the world, in this case, media tycoon Rupert Murdoch, publicly apologizing.
I also have to say that I failed.
He's talking about the illegal activity that led to the closing of his London tabloid.
All I can do is apologize to a lot of people, including all the innocent people in the news of the world who've lost their jobs.
Murdoch was testifying at Britain's media ethics inquiry, but the businessman infamous for seeing every detail insists he was kept in the dark about his own paper's illegal activity.
There's no question in my mind that maybe even the editor, but certainly beyond that, someone took charge of a cover-up, which we were victim to, and I regret.
That illegal activity included hacking into cell phone voicemails of murder victims and celebrities, all in search of sensational stories in the UK and potentially the US. The Commission Counsel wondered whether maybe Murdoch just didn't want to know, which led to this testy exchange.
A desire to cover up rather than a desire to expose.
Well,
would you agree with that?
People with minds like yours, yes, perhaps. I'm sorry, I take that back. But, excuse me.
I'm very thick-skinned, Mr.
You
Murdoch.
seem to...
So do not worry one moment.
And joining us now to talk about what the implications of the Murdoch scandal might be, Eric Boehlert, Senior Fellow at Media Matters for America. Eric, welcome. Thanks for a few minutes. Let's give everybody some of the implications beyond the legality here for the Murdoch empire. And obviously, folks here may be looking at this case like it's a little bit of TMZ, but there could be some real consequences potentially here for a lot of the tentacles that are under the Murdoch empire, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, first of all, it's been a huge blow to Rupert Murdoch's reputation, and let's not forget his News Corp is an American-based company. People think of it as, you know, it started off in Australia and it was mostly a British empire, but years ago, you know, he moved everything to the United States. He wanted to be in New York. He wanted to be part of the American business and culture. So this is first and foremost, you know, a massive scandal surrounding one of the most high-profile media corporations. But there are also allegations on this side of the Atlantic about sort of separate incidents of Murdoch employees hacking computers, hacking phone lines, and just sort of unethical behavior that the Justice Department is looking at, and they're trying to find out, is there a larger pattern of behavior within News Corp, not just in Great Britain, but also in the United States? And if investigators do find, you know, a larger pattern of anti-business practice or unethical behavior, that could lead to serious problems in the United States. The biggest problem Murdoch facing is right now, frankly, is the British government is trying to determine if his company is really competent enough to be in the broadcast business in Britain. And if they're not, they might yank his license. That is sort of the ultimate doomsday scenario in the United States. If that were ever to be found the case, that is sort of a long shot. But there's no doubt, you know, this scandal has hurt him in Britain, it's hurt him in Australia, it's hurt him all around the globe, and it's hurt him in the United States.
And we'll talk about some of that criminal exposure potentially in a minute. But watching the hearings, while there was some contrition on the part of Murdoch, he did feign ignorance here, saying that, hey, you know, I didn't know this was going on. You buy it?
I really don't. This is sort of his third or fourth explanation. Remember, this scandal is now 10 months old. This goes all the way back to last July when it really exploded. If you take a couple steps back, it's really been drip for 4 or 5 years over in Britain. But last July, when the story really exploded, you know, the official response from News Corp and the Murdochs was this was a single rogue reporter, investigator who was tapping phone lines, and that now appears comical since British investigators have determined close to, I think, 7,000 or 8,000 phones were hacked. So this was not a rogue operation. But some contrition, again, 10 months late. What's hard to believe is, you know, Murdoch was saying, well, I wasn't really involved. You know, I could go into the, you know, the media library and find 10 or 20 articles over the years about how Murdoch is particularly hands-on in his newspaper business, and this whole scandal surrounds his newspaper business. Now he says, well, News of the World, that tabloid, I didn't really pay attention. That's not what really I'm about. I'm more of a journalist. That was sort of a tabloid. But again, some contrition, but basically saying, I didn't know what was going on. Or even worse, my top lieutenants lied to me. They covered this up. They wouldn't let me know. Two things there. A, if they did cover it up, there's a culture of nobody tell Rupert Murdoch bad news. And B, there's also just a general culture of corruption where it's seen as not that bad to hack 8,000 phones.
Well, and also there's an issue of blood in that he kind of threw his own son under the bus, James, where he said, and I quote, he was pretty inexperienced at the time. He'd been there only a few months, obviously trying to protect family to this point. But even within the family here, there's, don't look at me, look at Junior.
Did you ask your son words to this effect, why the hell have we paid him so much money?
Yes.
And what was his answer?
He said I was given a short time, it was like given 2 boxes. Which one do you tick? And his advice was to tick this low one. And that's what happened. He was pretty inexperienced at the time, and he'd just been there a few months.
Yeah, and James, if you go back to last June, he was clearly the heir apparent. He was being groomed to take over News Corp when Rupert Murdoch eventually left the scene. He had sort of won out the little sweepstakes among the Murdoch children. Now, I don't think anyone thinks he's going to take over anything. I mean, his reputation has been completely destroyed. They moved him from Britain to the United States a couple months ago. They said, well, he was always going to come to the U.S., become more involved in the television business. But he clearly is one of the fall guys here. And yeah, I think Rupert's looking around. He doesn't really have many people left to blame. His editors, his publishers, his investigators, and even his own son. He is so isolated at this point, and it's amazing because a year ago he was at the pinnacle of his power, particularly in Great Britain. He could do whatever he wanted, and he did do whatever he wanted for years and years. Now, I mean, people who watched that testimony yesterday, even I think some of the people who are questioning him, he's been before Parliament in this committee several times. There's definitely a feeling of sympathy, or almost feeling sorry for the guy at this point.
And I would temper that if people really dig into the scope of this. I mean, we're talking 9/11 victims. Yeah. We're talking about deceiving, parents. We're looking for a missing child. I mean, you can't make up just how egregious some of this was. And I asked Eliot Spitzer, obviously former governor of New York, about some of the possible criminal exposure stateside. This is what he had to say. Can you explain to the folks at home on how Murdoch's problems carry over to the states from illegal exposure?
There's something called the FCPA, the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. It makes it illegal for a company that is headquartered here in the United States to pay bribes overseas. Even if the bribes are paid overseas, if the company is headquartered here and has SEC filings here, then that company is on the hook legally here in the United States. News Corp has admitted bribes, hacking, and all sorts of bad stuff over in England on the part of its journalists. The question is, will they be held accountable here? As a legal matter, I don't think there's any question they could be.
Well, speak to that, Eric, and I know you guys over at Media Matters have an open letter here where you want Congress to get involved with hearings. Talk about both the exposure and what you'd like to see happen as it relates to the U.S. and obviously Murdoch.
Well, the exposure, as Eliot Spitzer was talking about, is, again, News Corp is an American-based company. It must adhere to American business laws, and one of those laws is you cannot have your employees anywhere around the world bribing public officials in order to gain a marketplace advantage. You could argue, certainly, that these tabloid reporters were bribing. It's clear, it's been acknowledged, they did bribe British officials and British police in order to get scoops, in order to sell more newspapers. They were bribing public officials in order to gain a marketplace advantage. The Justice Department has been absolutely clamping down on this all around the world. They have won settlements in the tens and hundreds of millions of dollars from corporate America. So that is a problem. This is like I said, this is an American company. These laws apply to them. So that's one of the instances. United States investigators initially were looking at this, this sort of secondhand report from the British press that maybe 9/11 victims' phones were hacked. I haven't seen any evidence to support that. over the time. I doubt that's going to go anywhere. But look, as Media Matters has reported, just a few years ago, there was a News Corp subsidiary in the United States, News America, a marketing company, which was alleged, its employees were alleged to have hacked into the computers of their competitors. They went to civil court, and News Corp's attorney admitted in open court that, yes, our computers were used to hack into our competitors. There is a pattern. There's a pattern here, and there's a pattern in Britain. There was allegations of Murdoch newspaper executives trying basically to buy votes in the Australian Parliament recently. It sort of skips around the globe wherever Murdoch is. There are these allegations of using, what's supposed to be a news organization and essentially using it as sort of a shadow government or breaking the law in order to gain advantages with the competition. So the Department of Justice is investigating in the United States. I have no idea what will happen. That is a political football. If they do press charges or bring up News Corp on any sort of charges, the conservative media in America will go crazy. They'll claim it's a vendetta and it's a witch hunt and things like that.
They'll blame you guys.
Politics and what's that?
They'll blame you guys.
Yeah, sure. They'll blame us. They'll blame Obama. They'll claim he single-handedly argued for them to do that. So I don't think it's a straight up and down decision. There will be politics involved. A, they'll have to look at the evidence and see if it's good enough, and B, they'll have to decide, do we want to have to pick a fight where Fox News is going to go after us every night if we press charges?
Well, I think your call for hearings is spot on. I mean, if we're going to have hearings potentially for bounties in the NFL, one would think that this certainly can at least meet that threshold. Hey, Eric, I appreciate a few minutes. Thank you so much.
Sure thing. Thank you.